So to begin with, I'd like to introduce Dr. Rick Becker. He is an entrepreneur, a plastic surgeon, a two-term representative for District 7, and a father of 4. He's an advocate of limited government and free market, and he's currently running for North Dakota Governor. We're looking forward to hearing from him this morning on his plans. And then we also did invite all of the candidates for North Dakota Governor to be at the Q&A session today. And we thank you, Rick, for participating. We also have the pleasure of talking to Mr. Brian Kroshus. He's a candidate for state auditor. He's been in the Bismarck community since 1997 and has been a publisher of the Bismarck Tribune since 2005. He's currently seeking an opportunity to serve the community in an elected position, though he's been very active in serving the community throughout his career in the private sector as well. So I'll turn it over to Jason at this point, and you guys will have an opportunity to expand on your personal information as well. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, again, I want to welcome our 2 candidates, and I guess I'd like to just open up with, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're running for your particular office?
Well, so you got the basics. I'm from Mandan originally, and after my training, opened up a practice in Bismarck a little over 18 years ago, and I have been involved in some other businesses. Spa de Athena, I opened in 2000. I know I haven't been an owner of it since 2008. Also, the project downtown, Humpback Sally's Luft, and that project is mine as well. I got interested in politics much later in life than a lot of people. When I graduated high school, I don't think I really even knew the difference between a Democrat and a Republican. And when I tell my kids that, they just can't believe that. But it's true. I had no clue. It just wasn't something in our household. But after I got done with training and came to Bismarck and had some semblance of free time, I was doing a lot more reading and a lot more reading. I'm very geeky reading non-fictional political philosophy and history and things like that. So I started to develop this very strong interest and decided that at some point in my life I wanted to make a difference and try and help further these things that I learned about and believed in. And so I kind of developed more of a long-term plan. And I actually, in 2009, I think I took 2 courses, online economics courses through UND, because I felt if I was going to be in the legislature, I should really know something about economics. So I took 2 courses. I became involved a little bit in District 47 at the time, and met the chairman and kind of learned, okay, what's this all about? And went to the state party Republican headquarters and said, hey, I'm interested in becoming a member. I've never been a member. Is there such a thing as a libertarian caucus of the Republican Party? Because that's where I would fall in. Things like that. So anyway, as luck would have it, I got put into a new district after the census. And then suddenly there were 3 open seats. So the opportunity came knocking earlier than I wanted. I wasn't prepared at that time to do it, but that's when the opportunity came. So I ran, I won in 2012, and then again in 2014. And before I forget, I'm going to go back to, I did this thing a couple years back, and there was a person, very energetic, spunky person, who talked about the aspect that the state legislature was mainly old white men, and I really put that back on her and said, that's not on the legislature, that's on you, and it's on the people in this room, it's on the people in the state, because the legislature is made up of people who have the desire to serve. And so that can be anybody. The fact that it's mostly old white guys, well, I don't know, but the only people that can change it are people that aren't old white guys. So if there's an interest, I encourage you to do it. It doesn't take anything more than the desire and a little bit of good luck with timing. Things eventually happen. So anyway, I was very active in my first session. I was told by some of the people in the party, hey, Becker, when you first get in, freshman, you should really be seen and not heard. You kind of follow the rules. You take the lead of what other people are doing, and then that's, I'm there. My constituents vote for me to do something for them, to be active. My time's valuable just as much as anybody, just as much as anyone who's been there for 20 years. So I went in, head down, and I really tried to make a difference. And in doing so, it gave me the desire to run again in 2014. And really, you could just take everything I've said and magnify it, and now we have the governor's race, and so I've jumped in for that. Again, something that I thought possibly could be in my future down the road, but the opportunity is here. It's the first time in 16 years we've had an open race, and it's also based on economy and things like that. It's an opportune time for someone like myself to come in who's would consider themselves a non-establishment candidate, someone who's going to go in and really rattle the cage and try and fix things. And so, again, timing in my personal life not great, but the opportunity comes. You either walk through that door or you don't, and hope another door comes, and it may or may not. So I'm walking through that door. I guess I'll pass it off to Brian. I certainly am happy to answer any questions at all about being in office, running for office, and there's no question out of bounds for me. Okay, thanks.
Oh, good morning. I'm Brian Kroshus, running for state auditor, and as mentioned, I moved to Bismarck in 1997. I lived in Fargo for quite a number of years. I was born in Fargo, actually, attended NDSU, and then had a good career opportunity back in 97 and joined the Bismarck Tribune. I was in that role actually for the past 10 years, up until this last fall. End of October, I stepped down as publisher of the Tribune to run for public office and avoid a conflict of interest, because in any political office, particularly when you look at state auditor, you have to be you cannot have a biased opinion, you have to be objective. And when you're in the media, you should be the same thing. That has to be the goal of media, and media sometimes they do a good job, frankly, and sometimes they don't, and I'm talking about media overall. But decided to run for two reasons, actually. The first was I believe in transparent government, that the public knows at all times what's going on, how your money's being spent, and I believe in efficient government. And when you look at where what my background is in, the publishing industry. Now, I was more on the business side. I will confess I'm not a journalist, and I've relied on people who actually are when I've done various writing assignments and whatnot to get the content the way it should flow and whatnot. So, in fact, Catherine's in the room, and she would know best on that. But when you look at the transparency side of government and what the publishing industry, daily newspapers are about, it's about transparency. It's about inspecting and reporting back to the public, this is what's going on, and doing it in an objective fashion. So that was the first part, and that matched up well with my skill set and just what I believe in. It's what attracted me to the publishing industry. And the second part, especially now, would be more efficient government. And efficient government, that has to be a given whether we're talking about good times or bad times. And right now we're looking at an economic slowdown. You've heard about the almost $1.1 billion shortfall this biennium. And we're going to have to tighten our belt, and it can't just be with indiscriminate cuts across the board. Cuts are there are variations of that. And what I mean by that is we have to try and maintain the value proposition to the taxpayer. These are public funds that we're cutting. They're public funds that are being spent at any given time. And finding a better way to run state government so we're not diluting the value proposition, the services that we offer to the public, is critical. And those are the two primary reasons why I'm running. Transparent government, more efficient government. And having lived in the publishing world for a number of years, it's a tough industry. And if you don't tighten your belt and do things more efficiently, you simply don't survive in that sector. But the key isn't just to survive, the key is still to try and thrive and to put out a really good product, to not go backwards in terms of that value proposition. So anyway, it's been a really interesting experience since I officially announced in November. I've gotten to know Rick quite well on the campaign trail because we've traveled crisscross the state from one end to the other to district conventions, and it's been a wonderful experience so far. We're moving quickly toward the state convention on April 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, when the delegates will vote and endorse the candidates for the Republican Party, and that's it's going to be a sprint until then, and then I don't expect it will slow down after either. So happy to answer any questions at all, and ready to go on that part.
I guess I have one more follow-up question for you. Both of you have historically been in the private sector. Can you tell us why, or what would make you a good candidate for public office?
I think coming from the private sector, you have a fresh perspective. You're not looking at things the way they've always been done. And that doesn't mean everything has been done poorly. North Dakota has been well run overall, but bringing in a fresh perspective and having lived in an environment where you don't get a fresh set of funding every 2 years, I think that's a big advantage versus someone who hasn't had to worry about the revenue end of it, because for the most part it just would come in. And when you spend money in the private sector, you calculate every single expenditure, because you have to see what's the return on your investment. And that applies to government. What's the return on investment to the taxpayer? Because each dollar, when we talk about budget shortfall, we talk about budget surplus when that should happen, we talk about reserve funds, they're all tax dollars that the public has put in. So I think having that perspective of not counting that the money will always be there and how can we do it more efficiently, I think it's a huge advantage.
Well, North Dakota's legislature is pretty unique because it truly is a citizen legislature. We meet every other year for 4 months, and so it's very hard to be a career politician as a legislator. Now, being in the Capitol is potentially a different story, but when I talk with other legislators from around the country, because there are organizations, we have meetings, they can't believe that as a legislator I don't have an office. I have no office, I have no assistant, I have nobody. I have a locker for my coat, and that's fine. So it's an opportunity for any person to come in and try and help make a difference. And it doesn't matter if that person is a stay-at-home mom, or a construction worker, or a plastic surgeon, a dentist. It doesn't matter, because if we can get a cross-section of North Dakota, that more fairly represents North Dakota itself. The main thing is a willingness to examine what your beliefs are, so that when you go in there, you're not this malleable thing that people who have been there can form to really be just a second or third vote for themselves. You need to be your own person. And you need to go in being aware that it's going to take some work, because it's extremely easy being a legislator if you don't want to do the work. I mean, there's nothing to it. But on the other hand, if you actually are doing your due diligence and reading every bill and researching and learning, I worked in my first session, I worked pretty much every night till midnight. And then you have to balance. Like, there's so many of these dang things you go to for catered food. It's all the same. How many chicken skewers can you eat in 4 months, right? But if you go in knowing that you're there for a purpose, it's fun. If you know what you believe and you're going to stand by what you believe, it's really there's a freedom in that, and that you're not there because it's a stepping stone to something else, or because you have a sense of prestige. You're just going in there to do a job that the people elected you for. And then one other word on that, I believe very much in you vote according to what you believe. You don't take a poll, you don't put your finger in the wind. If you fairly represent what you believe when you're campaigning, the people elected you for who you are then. You don't need to take a poll, because I'll tell you what, if there's a bill that comes through, and people are passionate about it, I might get 100 emails, maybe. There's a lot of bills I get none, but if there's one that there's a lot of activity, I might get 100 emails. Well, in my district, there's 1,500 people. So am I supposed to vote because I got 100 emails? Does that mean that everyone feels that way? So you can't rely on that. I mean, it's good to learn. You want to have an open mind. You want to get people's perspectives. But when it comes to basic decisions, you just go by what you believe in, because that's allegedly who the people voted for. And that's the whole concept behind a representative government.
Great, thank you. I think I'm going to open it up to the group here. Does anyone have a question they'd like to pose to the panel?
Why should we vote for you, Dr. Becker, over Burgum and Stengham, and then for you, Mr. Kroshus, what are you going to do differently than Peterson's been doing?
So I'm going to take it that this is helpful because of the whole exercise that you've previously been going through. Sure. Not okay, because I mean I'm here for this part of it. I'm not trying to, unless y'all are going to be delegates, in which case I'll pull you off to the side. So we've got 3 candidates running for governor in the Republican Party, 3 very different candidates. And my position has been, ever since I was first elected in 2012, we need to, as a Republican Party who has a supermajority in both houses, we need to be more adherent to our platform, because a platform is one of small government, less taxes, less spending. Our history over the last 10 years has shown we haven't been very true to that platform. So my whole approach is, let's get someone in there that has these core values, and then we'll stick by them. Let's pull the party to the right so that we have fiscal responsibility. We wouldn't find ourselves with a budget that would have increased over 250% in the last 10 years. We wouldn't find ourselves in a situation now where we're scrambling. Let's get some leadership in there that really respects the people enough to be honest and frank with them, not sticking our head in the sand hoping things turn around, not saying, for instance, oh, Republicans have it covered. We foresaw all of this, and that's why we had the rainy day funds. Well, we didn't foresee it. If we foresaw it, we wouldn't have needed to do allotments, which is a terrible way to cut. If we foresaw what was coming down the road, we wouldn't have completely wiped out our budget stabilization fund. It's a matter of taking some ownership to say, what, we could have done things better. And people say, well, you're tearing down the Republican Party. And actually, no, I'm making it stronger. Because when we don't take responsibility, people lose faith. Look what's going on in the country. People are sick of politicians. They're sick of status quo Republicans in particular. If we had been more vigilant about what we were doing, we wouldn't be in this mess. People would have more respect for Republicans. People would have more respect for politicians. But there's a dramatic opening right now for people like me who I think the citizenry are looking for some fresh honesty, someone who's principled, that doesn't care about getting reelected, that certainly cares much less about getting reelected than they are about just doing the right thing.
Well, if I had to sum it up in one word, it would be experience. There's no substitute for operating for 30 years in an environment where you have to balance budgets day in and day out, or the budget will balance itself and not in such a good way. And to take that type of a perspective into office, I think would be incredibly valuable to each and every taxpayer, because that's who I would be representing. And to dovetail on some of Rick's comments, when you're in that type of a position, particularly as the auditor, but frankly any leadership position with state government, it's about serving the public in the best possible way and not worrying about how the vote will turn out the next time around. It means, especially in this environment, we're going to have to make some tougher decisions with state government. We're going to have to tighten things up. And we could talk at length in terms of philosophies on how to do that. But taking that type of an experience and what I think is really a unique skill set, and I've been known as an efficiency expert. in the company that I've operated in. I've managed properties across the United States, not just the Bismarck Tribune, but at the same time the Rapid City Journal, agricultural titles across the Midwest, a property in Flagstaff, actually one in Hawaii. That was my favorite wintertime visit to make. But so I've seen a lot of different sets of economic conditions, and you can't go to school and learn that. The numbers are critical. You have to have accurate numbers, but then the real question is, well, what do you do with them? And that's what I bring to the table.
Elaborating on that, you don't have to go to school to actually get real-world experience in some things. What are your thoughts on kind of higher education and the quality of education we're getting right now? And this would be for you too, Dr. Becker. You know, the costs are up, quality may be down. How do you fix that situation?
I think we have to take a hard look at higher education. And when tuition is rising at the rate that it is, and student loan debt has risen in the manner that it has, it's a concern. I have two daughters, both went through the North Dakota University system, one NDSU, one UND, just to keep it fair, and my youngest started here at BSC. And you saw the tuition rates rising. And, you know, frankly, I've never opened up an entire university budget to really be able to sit here and say, well, here definitively we need to do X, Y, and Z. I would have to do that due diligence first in terms of taking a look at the university system, the various institutions through the performance audit process as it would apply to the Office of State Auditor, and then come up with some intelligent recommendations. But you know, just looking at it as a taxpayer, as a parent who had children go through the system, you know, we have to look at how are we positioning these institutions for higher learning. It can't just be about bricks and mortar. It has to be about the quality of the teacher that we bring in. We've got some excellent teachers across the system. Are we ensuring that we're going to continue to pull in and attract the right type of talent to educate students, and then look at how we're approaching the hard costs, if you will, the infrastructure costs at the various campuses, and try and get it balanced out.
Well, higher ed's a mess as far as I'm concerned. You know, the state allocation for higher ed increased 36% in 4 years, and yet the student population in higher ed went down between 2 and 3%. You know, tell me how that works. So we've got a situation where we just have vast inefficiencies. We have the number of non-instructional administrative people on the payroll in higher ed has skyrocketed. You know, to what end? There's not more students. There's inefficiencies with regard to the various campuses. We have a redundancy of programs. There's no reason why you'd have the same program offered at Mayville as you do in Grand Forks. We have a situation, I forget exactly which dean or assistant dean it is, but at UND there's a dean of something, I don't know, student affairs or something, and they make more money than the equivalent dean in the University of California system. Okay, now that might be okay, except for the fact that the dean for UND is just UND, and they're making more money than the equivalent dean for University of California system with 300,000 students. I mean, and we have presidents and vice presidents and deans for Williston and Lake Region and Wapit. I mean, why? It's a tremendous wasteful redundancy. We're building brick and mortar, and yet we've got the technology now where more and more students are taking at least part of their coursework online. Why are we building more buildings when we're not actually utilizing properly the buildings that are existing? There should be a moratorium on that. We have a situation with reciprocity. The state is spending about $1 billion in higher ed per biennium. Over half of the students that are going to higher ed are out-of-state students. Okay, Minot State, Lake Region, and Williston don't charge any higher tuition for anybody, regardless of whether they're out of state in one of the reciprocity. They just charge everyone in state. The reciprocity programs, we also are at a distinct disadvantage when it comes to the ratio. Just at UND and NDSU alone, we have almost 11,000 students that are just Minnesota. Okay, so the thing is, I mean, it's great to have out-of-state students coming. But because of how we've done things, North Dakota taxpayers are not only paying for their own education or their children's education, they're paying for all of the other North Dakota students' education. And that's the way it works because we have a public education system with higher ed. The problem, though, is that North Dakota taxpayers are also paying for Minnesota students and all students from all over, including foreign. The tuition waivers, which is a full free ride that we're giving internationally, that's completely, I mean, it might be a great idea, sure, except for the fact that we're paying for it. So we need to take a look at that and get a little more balance in the reciprocity so that we're not funding out-of-state kids. I would like them to come here because we have a quality education. You know, like for instance, UND Aerospace Sciences. People are coming because of the quality of education. I don't want them coming because we're the Kmart of education, because we're the cheapest, easiest place to get a college degree borne by the taxpayers. So I probably gave 4 or 5 things that could be addressed, need to be addressed, and what we need to do is demand accountability from the presidents, from the State Board of Higher Ed, and from the Chancellor. Hopefully the Chancellor is going to start demanding more accountability. There's some hope for that. But the presidents, especially of the 2 research institutions, not the current president, hopefully I think Ed Schaefer is going to do some great things up at UND. Traditionally, in recent years, the presidents have looked at the universities as their personal kingdoms. Expand, 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 because it's more power, and losing sight of what the mission is supposed to be, which is to give a quality education to North Dakota students.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
How have you enjoyed the campaign process? And our last speaker made the comment that voters don't think, they vote with their gut or on emotion. And do you agree with that statement?
I've enjoyed the campaign mostly. There's the 47 districts, and hitting those, it starts to get a little bit old. It's hard to retain your enthusiasm when you're saying the same thing over and over. It makes me think of bands, you know, when they have a hit and they play that hit for 7 years. I just can't figure out how they do it. The debates, we had 3 debates this last week. That was my high point. I love that. I could do a debate every week. It was great. I don't know if anyone saw it at the Bell Mayhews, but I loved it, and that's an opportunity. That was really the first opportunity for people to see who the candidates were. I mean, it would be wonderful for the citizens to see more of that. So I have enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to the convention in 3-4 weeks. That should be a lot of fun. Another opportunity to give a more meaningful speech than what we can give in 3 minutes at some of these other conventions. What was the second part of your question?
Our last speaker talked about overall campaigning and advertising and helping candidates win elections. And part of what he talked about is a strategy of voters not really thinking. They more vote with their gut or emotion, and talked about and overall politics, it seems to be more and more about the game and your body language and appealing to people's emotions rather than talking about the actual subject. So just your thoughts on that.
Me leaning forward toward you, is that too aggressive at all? No? I'm all right. Let's see. I think there's a mix of voters. There's some that are thinkers and that are actually trying to figure out where they stand on the issues. They're the ones that are looking for the Tribune or something to give them a voter guide so they can actually do good comparisons, or maybe making a point to watch a debate or what have you. Then you do have some, a significant portion that are emotional, that, you know, they hear the one soundbite that means everything to them, especially if they're a single issue voter. And that's it, and it's hard to get past that. Or they might be more emotional in the sense of, like, you know, I like, you know, that guy always wears great ties. You know, it could be something like that. It could be body language. It could be anything. But it, you know, it's sort of part of the package. And then there's the third category that really just base it on name, familiarity, something as little as that. I'm trying to break across that that third category of voters, because in my current situation, I believe that if I can break through and have people look at any of the issues, that a significant majority will break my way, as opposed to just checking the box. And in fact, that's one of the downsides in my mind of running in the legislative race, is that when I first got into it, I was excited. I wanted to talk about my ideas. I was dying to go head to head against the Democrats. And again, nothing against the Democrats, right? But that's where we've got two parties, and so I want to beat the other party. But what I found was that, unfortunately, in district politics, it doesn't matter so much what the nuances of your positions are, what you say. It is, people look at whether you have a D or an R and vote according to that. And I would love for people to look beyond that and think about the issues.
Well, to start with, have I enjoyed the process thoroughly? In fact, I've mentioned it to several people. Had I known, I probably would have done this a lot sooner. The best part about going out to the various districts, for me, would be the one-on-ones, both before you speak, before the agenda kicks in, and then afterward, when you get a chance to go in and mingle, and probably after the questions are a little more pointed. They've heard you speak, they've heard the other candidates speak, and then they will actually ask specific questions about certain details of your campaign or of state government in general. So, but I would also, it is a grind. There's no doubt about it. I remember being, one brief stretch. One night it was Rolla, the next night Williston, back to Bismarck, over to Dickinson for lunch. The next day, Cooperstown in the morning, then Wishick, and then back out to Dickinson. And that was within a 72-hour stretch. But it's been a great experience. I can't imagine what it would be like to campaign in another state, whether it be, say, California or New York, because the people of North Dakota are just really good by and large. And it's a very accessible state, both from a campaign standpoint and also from whether you're a voter or a candidate. So that part's very helpful. One thing that we're dealing with right now is we're working with the delegate population. Approximately 2,000 delegates will be in Fargo on the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of April. I found that they tend to be more specific as well. They're going to dig deeper. They have an interest in the process. That's why they became delegates, and that as a rule. So you're dealing with a little bit different type of voter than the general population, which I would agree would tend to be sometimes are one-issue voters. Sometimes it really is how you look, how you act, and versus your resume might be more important to them, or they just don't take as much time as maybe you would want them to in terms of dealing with the issues and where you stand. But so we're dealing with probably similar to everyone in this room. I would say a little more sophisticated type of voter, someone with interest in politics.
So Sean Nightmare Volk, you got called sophisticated just now? That's pretty. I'll take it. I'll take it.
My question's for Dr. Becker. If you become governor, what is your vision for North Dakota, specifically Bismarck-Mandan, for the next 10 years?
Well, putting us back on the footing that I referred to, getting back to a platform for the Republican Party. Number one, interestingly enough, having someone like myself be in the governor's office and moving the Republican Party to its true platform actually will open up the game a little bit for the Democrats, because what I'm trying to do is pull the Republican Party to the right, frankly, because right now it's a huge tent party. And as it's known in a lot of areas, if you want to get elected, you have to be a Republican, it seems, in a lot of districts. And so that opens it up for kind of like, okay, anyone who wants to get elected is suddenly Republican, as opposed to whoever has these certain philosophies is Republican. So having the Republican Party pulled to the right, more to its true roots, makes it so that there actually can be two parties instead of one huge Republican Party and kind of this other one that's trying to gain ground anywhere. Anyway, I'm off on a tangent, but so the idea that where I'm going with maximum freedoms, maximum civil liberties, as the least amount of taxes possible for us to be able to do our job and provide the services we need, I think what that provides is a much better economic situation. So overall increased societal prosperity. When we look at some of the propaganda we get from the various governmental agencies, especially higher ed, they talk about ROI, return on investment. For every dollar that the government spends on such and such, we get a return on that investment of $1.93 or $2.11 or whatever. And it's because of a complete lack of either of understanding or willingness to recognize that every dollar that we are investing, again, that's a silly word, right, but that we're spending in some area is a dollar we took out of the economy, we took out of someone's back pocket. They would have spent it in a much wiser fashion, probably because it would have been according to what they wanted, which is the free market, as opposed to being directed. So that dollar, instead of being spent as one whole dollar, gets funneled through the sausage-making place of the capital, and it comes out, because there's overhead for all this bureaucracy and administration, it comes out as 75 cents. Then that 75 cents gets spent, who knows if it's the way the free market would have wanted it spent. So what we're looking at then is a diversion of monies that could have gone to work the market in a most efficient way. So I think if you have a better tax climate, and I've talked about this, the other two candidates talk about diversifying North Dakota. Well, the government can't diversify unless it picks winners and losers, unless it picks and says, you know what, I think to go along with energy and agriculture, this industry would be great for North Dakota. Well, okay, so you pick that industry and then you give them special tax deals, tax credits and this and that, and you pull them in. And it's to the disadvantage of other companies. And the idea is that if you give them special tax breaks, you make the tax environment better for them that they'll want to come here. My thought is if you take that little bit of logic and just expand it, why won't we do that for all then? Ireland just got two huge US companies, Pfizer and Medtronics, because their tax climate is so much better. And that's what North Dakota can, just make a better tax climate and we can get some more of the diversification. We don't have to worry about picking winners and losers. So, and then you say for Bismarck-Mandan, I mean, the one thing about being a free market guy is you believe in the market. I mean, I don't have anything special for Bismarck-Mandan, because if we can get a better tax climate, take less of the taxpayers' money, it'll be better in Bismarck-Mandan, it'll be better in Fargo, it'll be better in the small towns, it'll be better everywhere. So I'd be happy to, if you have like specific areas or in what manner might be changed for Bismarck-Mandan, I'd be happy to touch on anything. But that's again, it comes down to, just like I'm not doing anything special for a specific business, I believe, even as a district legislator, I believe very much in just doing the right thing. And if I wouldn't think it's a good idea if a legislator out of Fargo or Rugby or Watford City came up with it, I'm not going to vote for it because it came out of Bismarck. It's either a good idea for everyone or it's not a good idea. So there's a sense of parochialism that I don't buy into at all. And I've been hit by it. There's what's known as the Bismarck Mafia. That at least that's what I was told. And you got to play by the game, or you get shunned. Well, I can tell you that if I was a sheep, I would not be white. I can say that much.
Talking about getting brought into politics, it's very easy to see policy is important, but the auditor is really a much more technical position than a policy position. Can you talk about it? Do you have a CPA or accounting background for the technical side of the job?
You actually don't have to be an accountant to be the state auditor. Our current auditor does not have an accounting degree. His father does not have an accounting degree, so we're talking almost a half a century. What you have to be able to do is take the numbers, have the ability to analyze them, I've been involved in quite a number of performance and financial audits during the course of my career. When you work for a publicly traded company, you're scrutinized, whether it's Sarbanes-Oxley or internally, you're always looking for new efficiencies. You're verifying that the numbers are in fact correct. So really, that's a component of it. But then you get into what do you do with the numbers? And obviously, the current state auditor and his father, this happens to be his father, his predecessor, were more than capable of doing a good job for the state without accounting degrees. So it's a leadership position. You have to be analytical, which I think I've proven I am just by how I've risen in the private sector over the course of my career and given more and more responsibility across the companies that I've worked for. So it's a great question, but I've gotten that a little bit on the campaign trail. But when you talk about what you really have to have in terms of a background to be effective, you have to remember two parts to the job: financial audits, and these are straight up financial audits, ensuring that the money is being spent properly, numbers are accurate. But the second part of the performance audits. And that's where you do the research, you take the numbers, you take the information, and then you sit down and you start working with the agencies and saying, hey, here's a better way potentially to do something and get more taxpayer, provide the taxpayers with more value in terms of what you're doing. But you're correct, it's not a policy decision, a policy making position or agency. So you also have to be able to sit down and work with people effectively, because you can't mandate, well, you're going to do X, Y, and Z as a result of a performance audit. But if you're able to sit down with them and talk to them, show them the findings, show them how you arrived at that conclusion, get the dialogue going, you will come up with new efficiencies.
All right, any other questions?
So when we were working on the agenda, we were really hoping that some Democratic candidates would have come to the forefront so that we could have invited them to this event. And we have this really unique, situation right now where it is dominated by one party. But I'm, touching on the philosophy, how do you think that how will that impact the state of North Dakota by being so heavily invested in just one party?
Well, I'll start and just be very brief about it. I think competition is always good, but I also think the responsibility for fielding candidates, the Republican Party has done an exceptionally good job when you look at the fact that we have a contested governor's race, we have a contested auditor's race, and several others. There's the congressional race is contested, and then DPI, I believe I've rounded out the last of the contested races, is also contested. And of course, that's a nonpartisan post. But when you look at the fact that Republicans are fielding candidates, that's what our responsibility is to the party. And that's what the party offers the state. It really, frankly, I can't answer on behalf of the Democrats on who they might be fielding as candidates or why they haven't put forth candidates. That would be a question that only they could answer. But I think the Republican Party is showing that it's alive and well and getting after it. The turnout at the conventions has been nothing short of phenomenal. Up in Cavalier, there were close to 500 people at one district convention alone, which is, that was packed. When I was in Wishick, several hundred. Fargo had a very large crowd, and they've been quite busy as a rule.
Two parties is best. Or more. But I don't think it's good to have a sort of a monopoly on politics, and I frankly think it would be healthier if the Democrats were stronger right now. they could represent their constituency reasonably. The way I'm looking at it now, it's so hard for the Democrats to gain any kind of traction because what can they stand for? I mean, are they going to spend more? I mean, how is that possible? We just spent everything. You know, so they have to. I feel bad for, and I'm not saying this sarcastically. I mean, and they had to jump on the more milk for kids in the morning. That was one big issue, because it's so hard for them to find something that they can say, here's how we're different. They have to come up with stuff and find victims groups and this and that, you know, as opposed to being a party that was able to look at issues, say in the 60s, where they looked at issues one way fiscally and so forth, and the Republicans looked at it another way, and there was a difference, and people could decide which one they wanted. Right now, the Republicans cover everything, and that's where I'm getting at. Josh Boshi, kind of was trying to rib me a little bit. I think it was toward the end of the 2013 session, and said, you know, we're going to pick up several seats, especially in the east part of the state. I said, I hope you do. Because if we have, and this is, you shouldn't say this, right? Because a lot of people feel like the Republicans, you know, we already have a supermajority of, 70 some seats in the House, and they'd like to see it be 90. Well, I don't want to see it be 90. I'd rather have fewer seats, but have us all adhere to principles. And so there will be a pendulum swing. There always is. The Democrats are going to pick up traction at some point for some reason. Is the nidus for that pendulum swing the upcoming change in the economy? Maybe. One of the things that the Republicans have to worry about is they're so broad and you know, maybe encompass much more than what we stand for in our platform, that you get to a point of having enough people being unhappy with that, saying you're not staying true, that then there's talk of a breakaway third party. You know, there has been over the years. You know, Ronald Reagan in 1975, there was and this is one of 3-4 times, there was talk about, let's break away, the Republicans are too progressive, let's make a third party. And he came out and said, famously, that we don't need a third party, we just need the Republican Party to be stronger and carry a banner not of pale pastels but of bold colors, right? Which is why I had this pin made, the long story on the pin. But and so that's kind of my position too. Let's have the Republican Party be very, very clear on what it stands for, so everyone knows what it stands for, and it's bold colors. It's not kind of this gray area, these pastels that, like, well, we don't want to say this because we could lose a voter. Well, you do want to say that because that's what you believe in, and if we lose a voter, then maybe they're the person that goes to the Democrat Party. And we're fine with that because we have strength in sticking to what we believe in.
So across the nation, we're seeing significant distrust and lack of confidence in elected officials. What are you hearing across the state from voters of that regard, of our elected officials, and what's it going to take to turn that around?
I've got the mic, so I'll start, I guess. You know, the people that I'm speaking with most, or who are going to be frank with me, are going to have a tendency to be biased toward me, right? I mean, I'm not going to hear Wayne Stenjum or Doug Burgum fans patting me on the back saying, you know, that's exactly what we need. So I have a biased view, but I can tell you that my reception has been very, very good, of people saying that's exactly what we need. That's what we've been looking for. We're so sick of status quo. So there is carryover, and I don't know if you'd say carryover, but what's going on in the nation is also true in the state. There's an understanding that there is an establishment. And in fact, I have said that the Republicans, there are three groups. There are conservatives, there are progressives, and there are establishment. And establishment could be anything within the range of political ideologies, but they're first and foremost going to stand by whatever it is that the party wants of them, as opposed to what they believe in. And people are tired of that component of it. They want someone, they're starving for someone who actually believes and wants to go out and do it because they believe in it, not do it because it's the next rung on a ladder, or it's a cushy job, or it's a great salary, or whatever it might be. And I'm sorry, I forgot, there was a second component to your question.
And what's it going to take to turn that climate around to regain confidence and trust in the elected officials? Well,
you know, this right now is an opportunity. If what I'm saying is true, if there is that feeling across the state then it's highly likely that I would become elected. That alone will send a huge message, because Mr. Stenjum has been, up until recently, anticipated to be the winner. It's just, you talk to people, yeah, well, he's going to win. You know he's going to win, right? No, I don't know that, because no one's cast their vote yet. And so if it's not now, it'll be at some point in time that someone like myself, or several people like myself, enough legislators like myself, enough city councilmen like myself, who are going in because they believe in something. Again, they could be Democrats, doesn't matter. If they're going in because they believe in something, and they can convey that their passion really is with furthering government in the direction of what they believe, as opposed to this is something cool for me to do, I deserve it, then you're going to see that, and it'll either be this year. This is the perfect year for it. If it doesn't happen now, it'll be interesting. I've got a couple of predictions. If it doesn't happen now, what's going to happen? But I'll keep those to myself.
You might get that as a follow-up question now. The thing the climate has changed quite a bit from when I announced at the beginning of November in terms of what I'm hearing to now. And I think what really moved public sentiment the most was the $1.074 billion shortfall. And the question they ask is, what will it mean to me in terms of an interest that they have? Funding that goes to a certain area that's more specific maybe to that area of the state than another, but that's where their interest understandably lies. So I wouldn't say that they go down the line and talk about different elected officials, but they talk a lot about the state's philosophy. And there's definitely far more focus, attention, if you will, being placed on the current shortfall in state government. And I think just how the cuts were approached and addressed from agency to agency, a lot are fairly invisible to the public, if you will. If an agency has 7 open spots and they just decide, okay, we're going to leave those 7 open, we'll drop the savings to the bottom line, if you will. And that'll be a part of our cut. You still have to evaluate within that group of positions. If they're the 7 most important positions in the agency, maybe that's not, you just don't leave them open, you have to shift resources. But it's been interesting as more and more coverage has occurred on the different cuts, the shortfall, rest areas closing. People are far more in tune to it right now than they were last fall, when you could see this is what was happening. The person sitting to my left talked about it far sooner than that, but once the numbers actually hit and the new forecast came out, conversation amped up quite a bit around that topic. And I think in terms of what would change the sentiment, it would be demonstrating that we can get back to a level of spending that even in the more challenging times, when commodity prices are low, that it's very manageable for the state, and that we don't have to go back and always try to bridge these tough periods with reserve funds, because that's still the taxpayers' savings account, if you will.
Great. Well, thank you. It looks like
Brandon?
looks like we're just about time, unless you have a real quick question.
I guess it's kind of quick, I guess. You both have had that unique opportunity to transition from private into more of a public role or legislative role. I just wanted to kind of get, what advice would you give somebody who might want to get more involved in that process and kind of making that same transition?
Well, you have to realize I haven't served in a role yet for government. I went from the private sector, resigned my post, and now I'm seeking public office. So, I've exited the airplane, and now I have to work really hard to make sure the parachute opens. But I feel very strongly about what I'm doing. But Rick would definitely have a better perspective on that because he's actually done it.
Well, if you find that you've got the desire to serve, it's a funny word, right? It sounds like, people talk about, what a sacrifice you're making for this, and I feel awkward about that kind of phrasing too, because it's a choice. To me, it'd be like saying, what a sacrifice you're making to play intramural sports. It's like, no, it's what I want to do, and so it's not a sacrifice in that sense. But what that brings me to the point of to recognize where you're at with the type of job you have, where you're at on your career trajectory, and that's where I'm saying this isn't the ideal time for me, because it took me 18 years, and I'm right at the good point, and then so it's finding out what does politics look like for you? Is it a city, county position? Is it a state legislative position? Is it a statewide position? And are you able to continue your job? Are you able to pull back and still do adequately? And at what point are you able to make a full leap that you have to actually alter your career? Not to mention balancing it with family. And when it's people like Steve Jobs that gave a great talk about making a difference in the world, and even Glenn Beck, who I happened to be driving and I was listening to him, and I was debating on. I had done one session. I'm like, I don't know if I should do this again. It's really kind of a big deal. It's certainly a change in my life. I don't know if I can make a big enough difference to warrant it. And it was like he was reading my mind, and it was like, and then I had heard another speech about making a difference in the world. And so if you have a set of beliefs that you think is good for society, and you can find a way to get involved in whatever it is, you do your homework first, whatever the position is, what's required. Do you need to do any prep, like I did my econ stuff? You get to know the people that are connected with it, so you learn more about it, and then to whatever degree, networking is part of it to a certain degree, and then you just make the leap. I mean, why not? You only live once. I mean, you when you're 78, are you going to say, shit, I should have, darn, camera's going too. Are you going to say, I shoulda, coulda, woulda? I mean, heck, you try it. And if it turns out that it's too much of a burden, then get back out,
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank our panel. I'd like to thank everyone for their questions. I guess we're going to be getting ready for lunch here shortly, so and I believe we have extra lunches if our candidates want to stay, but I'm sure we got other things on your agenda. We've got to-go boxes if you need lunch, so.